our webinar today, we're looking at CRM and sales forecasting. Now, the first thing that we're going to be taking a look at is managing company data. And what I really mean by that is just the fields related to a company and the importance of them and which ones are important and how they kind of play into the overall conversation of CRM and sales forecasting. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to navigate to a company here. I have this company here called Westerling Interior Design, and it's of course a fictitious company, but it's a prospect of ours. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select to edit details, and I just want to go over some of the important aspects when you're looking at managing your prospects in the CRM system of Function Point. First of all, the more data, the better. You might not always have it, depending on the type of sales, the type of kind of the sales, related activities that you're doing. You may have a lot of prospects in your system. You may not always have the full information, but when you can, highly recommend putting that in. Get the information correct as well. This is actually incorrect. And then include as much as you possibly can. But there's a few things that are very important to this specific topic of sales, prospecting, and forecasting. And that is the company type and the qualification. Now, the company type is a very important field because there's actually some functionality behind it. It's not just labels. A client is, of course, a client. A company that is a supplier or a vendor, you can enter expenses for. They need to be one or the other if you're going to be putting expenses against them. And then prospect is typically what's labeling a company as someone who is a prospective client. You can customize the company type drop down in list maintenance, and you can use a different word other than prospect if you prefer. But things like office, clients, and one of these two at minimum need to be present. But you could put in your prospect there. You typically don't need additional types. So either a prospect or a client is usually my recommendation. And the reason being is that we have this field here called qualification. Now you're going to actually see this play out in a few other areas of the system. So it's an important drop down that actually has, again, functionality behind it, which we're going to take a look at today. This oftentimes represents kind of like a sales cycle. And I just noticed I have a little bit of redundancy in my list, but you'll notice it kind of goes through a bit of a process. Are they an opportunity? Have we done an introduction? Have we shown them our portfolio? Are we in that proposal stage? Have we issued them a final agreement to sign off on? And then have they become a client? So it kind of gives you a bit of a flow to that process. Now, this could be really simple. It could literally just be the numbers 1, 2, and 3. Are they level 1, level 2, or level 3 prospect? This qualification dropdown is handled in list maintenance. So you can customize it to your liking, but you really want to keep it as streamlined as possible. What I have here, to be honest with you, I think is probably a bit too much. You want to keep it pretty simple. But that's going to come into play when it comes to reporting. So it's important that you have that down and that everyone knows, everyone that's involved in the sales cycle and sales management knows what those labels are. There's a few other fields here. Source, where you're getting this prospect from, industry, that type of thing. We then have our custom fields, and the custom fields can be text areas. They can be date fields, or they can be drop downs with predetermined values. Now, all of these fields are searchable at the company level and therefore reportable at the company level. You can also add them for contacts as well. The area that you're adding custom fields is not in list maintenance, although you can manage the custom field in list maintenance, but really you want to go into the custom fields area. Now I'm going to take just a really quick look at this. When you are looking at custom fields, there's two sections that you can apply them, companies and contacts. It's really straightforward. You're just adding in the field, giving it a name, and choosing the type. If we choose a drop down 2 and select a field of drop down list, we can then add in what those options are, A, B, and C. and that information will then be available at the company level. So, there's there's infinite examples of what you might use this for, but all of it is searchable. So when you add that in, you can then do a company find, and you can search by those custom fields. So they can be quite useful, and they also exist at the company level as well. So I'm going to choose to submit that, and we have a prospect in there. So we have a prospect that's in there at the proposal stage. And the next thing that we're going to look at is some actual workflow processes around managing these prospects. I might, for example, want to pull up a list of all of my companies where I am the AE. The qualification is the proposal stage, and the company type is prospect. Select find, and that will produce the results of our search. So you'll notice that I have 4 companies that meet that criteria. So I have 4 companies where the qualification is proposal stage, and I am the AE. And you can, of course, include these fields by selecting to manage columns, which anyone who has been on these webinars before will recognize this type of thing as I go over it on almost every one. And also you'll notice the custom fields option as well that's available for you there. So let's say that I've had some interaction with Westerling Interior Design, and I want to take some sales related action. I want to put a note on my conversation. I maybe want to upload some files that were sent over to me that I'm going to be using in my proposal, and I want to set up a follow-up date specific to the person that I spoke with. This is really where you're getting into the actual workflow process of this sales management. I'm going to select the company, and that brings me to the company's details page. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to click on the Contacts tab, and I can see that I have a contact. It's Jane Westerling, and I want to add a note specific to my conversation with Jane. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this plus note button that's on the far right in the same line, the same row as her name. Select the plus note icon. That brings me to the note add page. Now, it doesn't matter how you get to the note add page. The page is always the same. What's different is what information auto-populates. So because I clicked plus note to the contact, the company and the contact are there. If I'd have done it from a job page, the job would be there as well if there was one. If I select add note from the main nav bar, it's going to do the exact same thing. It's just may not relate it to the information if I don't select the person. Here's where we're going to want to put in some details about our follow-up. So I might say something like, spoke with Jane, and then I'm going to put in, the details of the follow-up. Now, this information that I'm putting into this note is actually, if you choose for it to do so, is actually going to pull into the sales forecasting report as the current status of this prospect, if you do it correctly. So the content of the note is actually important. And in this case, I'm going to put something that we'll recognize. I'm going to put, reviewing details following up in 1 week. And then I might even put in, actually, I'll just leave it at that. There's a few things that we can do from there. One is, of course, we can pin this note to the dashboard of other staff people. Somebody else needs to be made aware of this for some reason. But more importantly, we can choose the category. Now, the category is an item in list maintenance, and you can customize this, but there's going to be one that's going to be default, and it's going to be called current status. Now, current status is what you want to select when you're labeling that note as like this is what you should read when you want to know what's going on with this. You might have 10 notes and only one of them gets tagged as the current status, because this is going to flow into the reports that we're going to look at later with the content of the note. So the current status category is very important to be selected when applicable. Don't select it every time. We're going to enter our follow-up date. So we'll say in a week. Maybe I want to follow up by 1 p.m. if that's important to me. And I'm going to choose to create a follow-up task. If you don't create a follow-up task, depending on your alerts, the system can email you at this time. But I like to create a follow-up task, and we're going to take a look at why in just a second. So I could submit that. I then have my note and I have my task. Now, when I go, and you'll notice that we're looking at the note details page. Now, and this has all the information relating to the note. Something I actually didn't mention that I meant to is files. We didn't upload any files, but of course we could have uploaded any files into this note as well if there's anything important that we need to include in here. And now if we look at the company details page, we're going to see that the notes tab and the tasks tab have popped out. And notes are typically like a repository for information, whereas tasks are more of a call to action. And because we have this task, if we look at our dashboard, oh, that was interesting. Just got logged out there. Sorry about that. So if we look at our dashboard, you'll notice that I have this task here called Spoke with Jane. You're reviewing the details, follow up in 1 week. And I can see that it's due on the 5th of July at 1 p.m. However, this is a prospecting task, which means that if I don't want to see everything else, I can choose to narrow this down to just my prospecting tasks. So prospecting tasks are tasks created through the process that I just showed you. Also, you can just label any task as a prospecting task, but it will automatically be done so if you create it through a follow-up task on a note. And this allows me to quickly see, what are all the follow-ups that I need to do. Well, I spoke with Jane, and it's for Westerling Interior Design. Asked me to call back in 1 week, and that's on the 5th of July at 1 p.m. So I have that task there, and I can then, on that date and that time, I can, select the task or the company, and then update my next note. So that allows you to keep that repository of information and all of those calls to action in a single location. Looks like I might have a little bit of a tricky situation going on here. Apologize for the delay. Looks like maybe somebody might be doing some work on my demo system at this time. Sorry about that. Hopefully it doesn't kick me out again. So we have our, all of our calls to action there, all of our repositories for information. So it's pretty easy for individuals to manage their follow-up task list in a way that is simple and easy and allows someone else to come and quickly review the information. So, it's really around those notes and turn them into prospecting tasks. But there's a next important step to take a look at, and that is really where we start to put in the actual opportunities, and we start to look at the process of putting in the data related to the sale or the potential sale, its value and things like that, and how we actually start to build out those forecasting reports, even if the type of prospecting activity that we've just gone over is not something that you're doing in the system. The taking advantage of the sales forecasting is something that you can do as well without too much effort. Now I've seen a few questions pop up and go down, so it looks like Sophie's handling that well, but I just want to check in. Sophie, anything I've missed or anything you want to comment on?
Hey, Mark. Yeah, thanks for checking in. You know what? Again, some really good questions, but I think it's probably when we start diving into like the whole estimating for potential work that the questions are really going to start rolling in. So I'll save more time for then.
Awesome. Sounds good. Okay, so let's say then that we want to put in an opportunity for, in this case, Westerling Interior Design, and we're going to put in an opportunity that's potentially going to be a new website that we're developing for this company. And we don't really have a lot of details for it. A lot of the time, agencies will tell me that, it can be difficult to put in a full estimate into function point, especially if the AE doesn't have all the information, or even if they potentially could, they just might not know all the details. So I'm going to show some really quick and easy ways to enter the opportunity and its value. The way that we're going to do that is by choosing for the company to add a new estimate. Now, in this case, we're going to call this WID website development. So we have WID website development. We can then choose our type. We'll say this is a website. And then there's a few things that we want to make sure that we do here. So we want to fill in the contact. We want to fill in the delivery date when possible. This would typically be the date that the work would actually be done. So I know that they want this, this website built by the end of July. There's other information like category if you know that data, but there's a few other fields here that are really important. One is the month close. This is going to translate directly into the reports that we're going to look at. This is supposed to be when this is actually going to be signed off on, and when we expect the client to pull the trigger and sign the agreement. And this allows you to build up the forecast reports based on month. And I'm going to say that we expect them to pull the trigger on this in July. I also have a close probability. This is supposed to represent the percentage of chance that we expect this to close. I'm going to say this is a 90% chance. Now you can just put in 90 for 90%. This field's pretty intelligent. I believe if I put in 0.90, it'll pick that up as well, and it'll consider either or as 90%. So if you put in, 1 or 0.1, it's going to equal, 10%. Or if you put in, 10, or you know what I mean? It's going to be 10%. If I put in 100, it's going to be 100%. So that's how that works. I typically recommend don't enter a decimal. Just put in the percentage that you expect it to close. Now from there, this is where we're going to keep things pretty simple. We're not going to put in a lot of detail, but we want to put in the value of the potential work. And I'm just going to choose web design, and I'm just going to choose a single service of web design. Later on, we might come in and add in wireframing and coding and SEO and other aspects, but for now, we're just going to choose web design. We'll submit that, and that brings us to the service structure. Now, this is where I recommend, if you don't have a lot of the detail, then all we need to do is just type in a dollar amount. So in this case, I might say, well, we're going to charge, $12,000 for this website. Or that's what we're going to propose it at anyways. Now, some agencies put a lot of stock into hours and forecasting, what kind of hours we expect to spend on things. If you have that information, great. If you don't, that's fine. Just enter the dollar amount that represents the value of the opportunity. Save that, and there's one other very important step to this, and that is looking at the basic info and choosing to put this estimate in a status of submitted. So I can put this estimate into a status of submitted. And I now have an opportunity that I'm basically said, well, this is a submitted estimate for a client that's in the proposal stage, for a prospect that's in the proposal stage. And everything that I've done is all then adding up. It's creating this profile of what this opportunity is. And we can look at that from the company level as well. So we can see from the company level that this is a prospect that's in the proposal stage, and we have an estimate out for them that is submitted for a value of $12,000. And this, as you enter these opportunities, it will start to accumulate and provide you with data to pull back out to look at potential forecasting opportunities. So that's really the basics of entering the estimate. I mean, it's really simple. You're just wanting to put in, as much information as you have at the time, making sure to include the month close and close probability. Those are two very important fields. Now, there's some simple ways, very easy ways to report on this. For example, I can do an estimate find. And this is just a really, really simple way. If you just want to quickly check it out, do an estimate find and say, well, I want to look at everything that has the approval status of submitted. And I might narrow this down by certain AEs. That's important to me. I can narrow it down by, well, as you can see here, there's a variety of different fields and options. But in this case, I'm just going to say, show me all my submitted estimates. And that produces the results of our search. So, we have 26 submitted estimates that are currently sitting out there. This is a list that you want to make sure that you're cleaning up from time to time. If something is really old, for example, then you may want to go ahead and choose to decline that if you don't believe it's going to go down. From there, up at the top, of course, you can manage your columns. There's a lot of cool things you can do with that. And then once you've done so, you can export it to Excel. But there's also this report that I like a lot. It's called Estimate List by Client Report. And this allows you to see a really kind of nice, concise, easy overview of the different opportunities. So we have the company, the amounts of opportunities in for that company, and then the details for them. The name, the status. The status is basically just kind of, is this active or not? It's typically everything you're going to see is going to be active. Initials of the account executive, the due date of the potential work, the description of the item. We then have the estimated hours, if there are any, and then dollar values broken down by internal service, internal expense, and external expense. You can then see the total value. So for Great Atlantic Insurance, we have 5 opportunities out right now, and it's totaling about $31,000, just over $31,000. So there's quite a bit in there for Great Atlantic Insurance, and we can see that our total might actually have. So that's kind of interesting. I was expecting a total at the bottom there, and I'm not sure why that's not showing. I'll have to actually check on that. But if you did want to see a total, of course, you can always just produce our PDF. And we can see, we have about $314,000 currently sitting out in submitted opportunities. So there's a lot of value there, and we can make sure that we can, bring that report, maybe sort it by AE, organize it by AE, and then provide it to those AEs and say, hey, here are your opportunities. Give us a status update on each one of those. So that's a pretty simple way to then take advantage of those estimates that have been put in. And I just want to stress one more time the flexibility of the managed column option and what you can do there. There's a lot of really cool stuff, especially if you're savvy with Excel, that you can create and customize. But there are some sales forecasting reports that are a bit more standardized that are quite extensive, and I'm a big fan of. We can see those if we look in our reports module under the area of CRM and sales. So under CRM and sales, you're going to see 2 reports. Well, there's a flight contacts, but I don't see that used as often. But there's 2 sales reports that I want to show today. There's new business by month close and percentage probability, and new business by account executive and qualification level. They're similar reports, but they give you totals by different values. The first thing that we're going to look at is the top one, the month close and percentage probability. Now, right when I select this, you're going to see how many of the things that we've been talking about, directly relate to the report that we're producing. So, for example, some kind of high-level stuff at the top that you typically don't need to mess with. But then we have some important filters. So, month close. When I want to narrow this down to only opportunities that I expect to close in July and August. I want to see only things that I expect to close soon. Furthermore, I only want to see opportunities that are submitted. I don't want to see anything that we haven't actually submitted to a client or to a prospect yet. I'm also going to choose my company type. Now I'm going to narrow this down to just prospect, but you might actually have opportunities that are submitted or in review for clients as the company type that have not been approved yet. It's new business for companies that you've done business with in the past, so therefore they're a client. They're not a prospect, but they may not have signed off on those new pieces of work. So that's an important distinction as well. I'm then going to narrow it down by the specific account executive. I'm going to say myself. I will choose one other. We'll say Jess here. I'm then going to choose the qualification level. And this is, you'll notice, it's on this report filter. And this is an example of how important this field is. I'm going to say, just show me everything that's at the proposal stage. So I'm only wanting to see really, really high probability items here. A high probability in that they're at the proposal stage, that's a submitted opportunity for the next couple months. I'll submit that, and that will produce my report. Now, this report is really easy to read once you know what it's showing to you. It's a really, really simple report to understand with some really strong data. So what this is showing us here is each of the opportunities by month. So in July, we have we have 4 things we expect to close, and in August, we have 3 things that we expect to close. I can then see the company type. So are these opportunities for prospects or are they for clients? And I mentioned earlier that you might have clients that's you have open opportunities out there for. We can then see some other labels like source and industry and things like that. But then we get into the actual opportunities. What is the opportunity? What is its name? What is its type? When was it created? What's the status? So in this case, they're all submitted. Hours, if any have been entered. And then some values. So it's going to show us what is our value of internal services? What is our value of expenses? So expense gross revenue is basically saying this is not just the markup value of the expenses, but the total dollar value of the expense, cost and markup, and then the total dollar value of the opportunity. We then have our close probability and an adjusted value based on that close probability. And this is where that can become a very, very powerful thing. It's really easy and not very labor intensive at all to get these opportunities in the system. If you're an AE, as we kind of reviewed earlier in this webinar, dropping these in here is very, very simple. It's not time consuming at all. And by them putting in a close probability that may fluctuate over time, we can then have an adjusted value. It's a really good and commonly used technique to seeing forecasted potential sales revenue in coming months. And we can see the month close, of course, it's organized by that. And then we have our note content. So as everything's kind of coming full circle here a little bit, the notes that we entered, and you'll notice this gives you a bit of a description. This is the very last note, the most recent one that is labeled as current status is actually going to show up in this report. And that's where this is a really, really easy report for like a sales manager or a CEO or principal, depending on the size of your agency, can get this report and produce it at any time and not have to go and talk to their AE all, not have to track anyone down, get an update from them, ask them, hey, how's that one opportunity going? Because right on this one report, they have an overview of what all the opportunities are, when they expect to close, how much they're worth, what's the probability of them coming in, an adjusted value, and then right away, the first thing that I would want to know is, okay, well, what was the last conversation that was had, and what's the next step? So I can see, when was the last conversation? When is the next follow-up? And then what was the content of that conversation? What was the content of the note? Really, really easy report for a senior staff to review on a regular basis to understand the potential that is currently out there with their sales team. So I highly, highly like this report. It's a great one. And it's really, really easy to populate the system with the data that makes up its values. Now, the other report is pretty similar, but there's some major differences, actually. This is organizing by month, and it does give a summary by AE at the bottom. However, the other report, which we're going to look at, is by account executive at qualification level. So this allows us to organize the data by AE. So I'm going to choose, we'll stick with what we did before. We'll say myself and Jess. And then also look at our qualification level. So if I have multiple opportunities at different stages, different qualification levels, which to be honest, I don't think I do. I think I just have them at the proposal stage in this example. But we can select multiple qualifications and see them organized by those qualifications. We'll use our approval status again. We'll say we just want to look at prospects, and I'm going to leave this blank. I'm not going to narrow it down by that. Submit this information. And this is then allowing us to see, by individual, so account executive Mark Wilson, by qualification. So we have the proposal stage for myself. There's 5 opportunities in proposal. If there was multiple qualifications, then we'd see other yellow headers with the number of opportunities in that qualification, and then the other individuals as well. And I believe that the data is mostly the same here There's hours, there's the value, there's the close probability, the month to close if it's been entered, and the most recent follow-ups. So again, really, really easy way to see what are the opportunities out there, what's their qualification, who is leading, who's managing that opportunity, and then what's their value and their adjusted value based on the subjective opinion of the individual entering them. So really, really two great reports. I'm a big fan of both of them. I highly recommend using them if you're not using anything like it already, or if the process for you to gather your sales and forecast information is a bit more tedious or time consuming. So if you just want to check in, any questions about these two reports at all?
Hey, Mark. Yeah, thanks for checking in. I'm actually just typing out a response now to Melissa, but she was just curious if there was a way to set for this report to just automatically populate for you weekly. Unfortunately, it will not. You will need to download all of the reports in the system as you need them, but I wasn't sure if you maybe wanted to elaborate on that, Mark.
I mean, it's a good question. It's a common one. We have been looking at some different reporting options in the system for different ways of doing reporting. It's a bit far out, but there's potential for that type of thing in the future. In the meantime, if you do want to produce this report, you do need to come into the report section and then select it and then fill out your values. So those values will probably change quite a bit from time to time as well. That's another reason why these reports actually might be a little bit difficult to automate, because you're going to want to change the month close and then potentially statuses and things like that, depending on which report you're wanting to see. So a bit of a challenge in automating that. So you do need to produce it when you do want to see it. But you kind of get used to it. You typically kind of know the filters that you want to select, and you can jump at them and enter them pretty quickly once you know what you're looking for. Okay, so if any other questions that you want me to address there at all, or it looks like you got a pretty good handle on those so far.
Yeah, there is one other question. I think it's probably what you're about to address anyways, but I'll just make sure that it is just in relation to when a salesperson wants to actually track their time for like working and bringing in these new pieces of work. Is that something you're gonna sort of tackle?
Yeah, that's a really good question for sure. So let's take a look at that. Something that's pretty common is the situation that Sophie just outlined, and that is, when you're looking at the time spent to gain the work, that's information that generally, if possible, you want to try to capture. Now, some agencies do and some don't, and there's a few different ways of doing it. I'm going to show both methods right now. Now, I always recommend for sales-related time to be tracked. Sometimes some agencies don't really do that; they don't really see it as necessary. But I do recommend it. I think most probably do, and I do recommend it. The real question is: do you want to track to a in-house job, or like just an overall sales and new business development job, or do you want to track specifically to the opportunity? Now, if you want to track to just an in-house job, that's really simple. You'll just have your internal tracking job. So I'm going to say, show me everything for FP. And I have a job here called sales time logging. And this is where I can say, well, I was working on, some prospecting for 2 hours, spoke with Jane Westerling and submit that. And then I'm really just tracking time to the overall sales time logging, and that just, allows you to see, the time that's spent in the different types of activities. It's not really going to give you a prospect-specific sales, time report if we're just tracking to the sales job. There is another option that's a bit more sophisticated and can give you more accurate data. The way that we're going to handle that is if we do, so in this case, if we pull up the estimate that we're looking at, so I have my Westerling interior design website development job. I'm going to leave this in the status of submitted because we've submitted this opportunity, but it hasn't been approved yet. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to choose to add the job. So I'm going to add a job for this estimate. Now, it's automatically going to put the job into a status of open, but you may not want that. And typically, if you're going to be opening up jobs for work that has not yet been gained, then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go into list maintenance and make sure that you have a job status that represents something like, preliminary. Preliminary. Why do I have a hard time swallowing that word so much? Something like preliminary or, pre-sale or prospecting or opportunity or something like that that is not just open. However, you do want that status to be an alias of open so that people can track time to it. So leave it as an alias of open. You can also make it the default if you're going to be doing this a lot. So if you're going to be, opening up jobs for work that has not been gained yet quite a bit, then you might want to make it the default, and then people have to manually select it from preliminary to open. That's another option that you have as well. But that means that we can then put that job into a status of preliminary, and everyone has it available to track time to. And we could even put in, instead of having, web design, we could just put in 2 lines, web design with $12,000 and another line of, proposal management or, prospecting or pitching. Pitching is one I see from time to time. And that allows us to then track time to a separate line item. So we're not skewing the numbers on the web design portion. So you might want to have another service. And then at any time, we can do a job find and see, okay, well, show me all the jobs that are preliminary. Now, it'll just be one in this case, but we can then produce that list and see all the things that we're currently pitching that have not been closed yet. So, it's pretty simple to manage that process, but like anything else, it does need to be managed. If you don't manage it, it can get a little bit out of hand, especially if you have a lot of opportunities that are going in. So you need to make sure that you're updating those statuses on a regular basis. Now, that's something that I like to talk about a lot because it's so important in the system. It's making sure that at any time that you do a job find for find active or open or preliminary or anything that's considered active, that you see a list that is accurate. And it's not a list that has a whole bunch of stuff that's old and shouldn't be there. And that's a cleanup that you want to really try to make sure you're doing regularly. Have someone look at it, monthly or potentially even, bi-weekly, depending on how much new business you run through the system. So it's something you really want to keep track of because otherwise it won't mean anything if it's not accurate. So something you want to keep an eye on for sure. So yeah, time went by pretty fast. That's really all the information that we have for our CRM and sales forecasting. Again, I'd recommend if this is something that you're interested in taking a look at, it's really easy to just dive into it. The first thing you're going to want to do is make sure that you do a bit of a cleanup on your estimates. Make sure you don't have any estimates that are in submitted or interview status that should be approved if that's something that you're going to manage, if you're going to want to be doing, and then make sure that you have your qualifications in the system, and then you can just start putting in opportunities, really easily. You don't need a lot of info in there, just a dollar value and the name of the opportunity and type. And then you can start to run those reports with very minimal effort. So, I usually say to people, if you're not using anything for, kind of sales and CRM type activities, Function Point will probably be a really great fit for you. If you're coming from another system that's similar and you're kind of doing similar activities, or you're doing this type of thing in Excel, then it's pretty easy to translate into that activity into Function Point 2. And then lastly, I typically say if you're using something like, let's say, like Salesforce, and you're like really, really ingrained in it and you've been using it for a long time, you may want to look at potentially, managing the overall kind of sales activity in Salesforce. But then because it's so easy to drop in those estimates into Function Point, and just with a single line and a dollar value, you can kind of run that both in tandem. And when it comes time to present a proposal or an estimate to the prospect or the client, then you can quickly generate that in function point really easily while you're still managing it in Salesforce, so that you can run the reports out of function point to see a combination of signed and not signed work and what's going on there. So I think there's opportunity for companies to be utilizing this type of thing, regardless of what other systems they might be using to track and manage this stuff. So if we have any last questions before we hop off today?
There is one more from Brandy, but I'm not sure you're going to like it.
Let's take a look. What's going on?
We're just asking about bulk editing. I know that's always a fan favorite to ask on ways to be able to bulk edit multiple companies at one time.
Gotcha. Yeah, so as some users do know, there is an opportunity for an editable list view and a job list. However, unfortunately, having full inline editing in our list views is not something that's currently, not something that's currently available other than the job list. I know that it is definitely on the roadmap. I've been involved in conversations related to this topic. It's a little bit tricky because, of course, some things make sense to be editable and some things don't. Something like a proposal, a qualification makes sense to be editable, whereas company lists, I suppose, maybe almost anything could. But then there's other areas of the system, like you probably don't want to be able to bulk edit anything with a dollar sign in a list view. So it's a little bit tricky. I know that there is plans to add the bulk editing features across other areas of the system. But one thing I can show you to help with it, and you might already be familiar with this, but something I can show you to help with this a little bit is, let's say that you wanted to change the qualification level or no categories or whatever, and what's the fastest way to do it? So the fastest way to do it, so right now I have this company list that's in a proposal stage. Let's say I wanted to change these all to something else. The quickest way to do that would be to add the edit button back in if it's not already there, and then click edit on the top one, change it from, in this case, we'll change it from proposal stage to client, submit that, and then just click on the word companies in the main nav bar. Doing so is going to bring you back to a list of all the companies that meet your search criteria from earlier. And one of the companies that doesn't meet your search criteria is the company that we just changed the qualification on. So if I then edit the next one, change it from proposal stage to client, submit it, and click on companies, notice how we now only have two. So I've been involved in doing some pretty big list changes and edits, and I've changed like 500 records in like an hour. I mean, it sucks. It's you're sitting there for an hour doing it, and 500 is a bit extreme, but I've been involved in that. And it's pretty quick once you kind of get the hang of it. Now, I know it's not ideal, but it can be pretty quick, especially if you're only dealing with like 100 or even 50 or something like that. I mean, you can do that in like 15 minutes if you just follow that process of edit, change, and then click on the company. You can go through it pretty quick. So, if any last items here that you think we should address, I think I saw one more.
Hi, yeah. There's one more question from Tiffany. It's actually a pretty good one. Just speaking towards integration between sales CRMs and Function Point. I know there is some kind of beta around Salesforce. I'm not sure if you know a little bit more about that than I do, Mark, or anything.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll talk towards Salesforce. It's been around for a while. I wouldn't really say it's a beta, but I would say it's not really widely used, but it is available. Now, the way that the Salesforce integration works, the sync is pretty straightforward. If you look in your admin and you look at app integrations, you'll find Salesforce, and you can just enter your Salesforce login information there, and it takes you through a process. So it's pretty easy to do. Generally, what happens is accounts in Salesforce become companies in Function Point, and you can manage the account, usually manage the account up until either it's closed or you want to put a dollar value into Function Point, in which case you'd sync it. You'd find the account in Function Point as a company, under which you can then create really well whatever you want. So it's not super complicated. There's not a whole lot of cross transferring of data, but if you are using Salesforce, then it's a no-brainer. Then you'd want to do that for sure. As far as other CRM systems, anything else would really be done through a Zapier import, which I believe that we can work with Zapier. I've seen it done with systems like HubSpot, for example. I'll be honest, I don't really know the full details of exactly how that works, but I know that you will find information on it in the training module. So if you're familiar with Zapier, then you can take a look at that, and I'll probably have to read up on that a little bit as well because I haven't really looked at it in some time, so I'm not really quite sure the current status of that. But I believe that I've seen people do it with HubSpot quite a bit in the past. So if anything that I don't about the Zapier thing.
No, I think probably your knowledge is the same as mine. I think I've also seen some customers of ours have been successfully able to do it with even just an Excel doc. So also something that be worth looking at if you're looking to import
via Zapier. Is that like Excel doc like via Zapier?
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, Zapier is a really great, sync tool to change information from one system to another. So, so I mean, that's an easy way to do it. Okay. Well, that about brings us to our time. We were pretty efficient on time today. Again, I thank everyone for taking the time. I thank everyone for your questions. We really appreciate it. If you do have any suggestions or requests, you can send them to success@functionpoint.com. We'll be happy to take a look at those. And then again, 2 weeks from now, we are doing our webinar of ensuring profitable retainers. So I'm pretty excited about that one. It's not just the point and click aspect of it, but also the some agency best practices and suggestions around managing retainers and some pitfalls to avoid and some tips and tricks to make sure that you're really getting the most out of those retainer relationships. So 2 weeks from now, same bad time, same bad channel. We will see you all there. Thank you again very much, and have yourselves a great rest of your Wednesday. Take care. Bye now.